Zach from Gravel Bike California, here underneath the Alps, where I'm ready to go up the monumental Mont Ventoux. Gravel in California might not make me qualified for this ride, but we all imagine places where we really dream of going there on our bucket list, and this is really on all of ours. I mean, with the history of the Tour de France and just how epic this climb is, this is a lifetime dream. Now, at the same time in California, we do have other climbs that get us ready for this, so I'm curious to see how they compare. Also, I've ridden this climb hundreds of times on Zwift, so am I prepared? C'est parti! While Mont Ventoux is one of the hardest rides we all aspire to, the biggest obstacle for most of us is getting there. Starting with the best direct flight into France, landing in Paris taking 11 hours. And out of the 4 most iconic climbs in the Tour de France, Mont Ventoux is the easiest to reach. Still, landing at Charles de Gaulle Airport, we had to take a train into the heart of Paris to Gare du Nord, then a subway over to Gare du Lion, now having high-speed train access to the south of France. Being just an hour from the ride, we stayed in Avignon. That's the closest to the high-speed TGV stop, though also for its history from the medieval ages, including the palace that the popes occupied for most of the 14th century, and proximity to other enclaves with roots in antiquity. Mont Ventoux sits on the western edge of the Alps, with 3 options to ascend, but Bédouin is the most featured route. You can spot that iconic tower from afar, but be sure to check wind conditions to see if it's palatable to reach the top. Entering the town, you cannot escape this climb's prominence. Pretty easy to walk away with some additional keepsakes. There are a few shops renting bikes, but Reve de Velo had the easiest website to navigate, had staff that spoke English, and got me on the bike efficiently. More importantly, it was located steps from the starting marker of the climb, ready to bring the adventure up Route du Mont Ventoux. From the bricks to the top marker, the climb is slightly over 13 miles or 21 kilometers, but in either system, you can break down Ventoux into quarters. The bottom provides a good warm-up, carrying the lightest grades of the ascent, blending in with the Ventoux AOC wine region. With the grade averaging both above 9%, you may blend the middle 2 quarters, also for being surrounded by trees, but there is a subtle difference between the upper and lower forest. It all culminates at the top, absorbing the history and unique environment that may make you overlook you still need an effort to get there. All in all, it's nearly a mile worth of vert, where the length and altitude will come into play. There are plenty of other riders if you need a partner, as I decided to begin at the circle just west to whip up some momentum. And if you can't understand the signage, you know you're on the right track, with the start just seconds away, giving myself about 4 hours to return after all the sightseeing, not feeling like I was ingrained in the climb at the opening, riding through the more modern outskirts of town, and passing Café du Cycliste that I've been patronizing online for their clothing, also offering rentals and showers, as it's easy to exit out of Bédouin in the first couple of minutes. One thing I know is the first mile is relatively flat, with a little bit of a kicker on the chicane, but definitely good to get a warm-up out here and smell it all. The grade changes on Ventoux are hard to catch with the human eye, and you wish they were all like this slight pitch at 5%. Hard to embrace this monument early, surrounded by the pastoral aspects of life, looking for ways to add to the narrative, with few side options available, helping to find a sense of place, starting to blend into the fields of this wine region, and passing the most challenging fork in the road that should be easily navigable, though hard to believe that peak is attainable when it presents itself, juxtaposed with people biking for ordinary means, as nosing around you can be intrigued by some of the side accommodations and those that served an earlier purpose. It's definitely encouraging seeing riders come down, though the road now narrows without a center line all the way up to Chalet Reynard, easy to join in on the camaraderie around.
Hello.
Have a good ride.
Yes, you too.
You may not notice the pitch delicately rising back up to 5%, hovering around this grade to near the end of wine country. And if you have extra time, there are other tiny villages to explore, but you might want to bring extra gear along, as there also seems to be camping opportunities to take in all this history.
Mont Ventoux was first included in the tour in 1951, and including 2025, it's been used 19 times, which is about every 4 years. Alpe d'Huez was introduced a year later, it's been used 50% more. The leader, Col de Tourmalet, 62 stages and 60 editions. It's a lot of climbing.
Right before finishing kilometer 4, you enter the village of St. Colombe, the most noticeable one you'll ride through to the peak, also containing a strong possibility for post-game on the way back, with your visit likely measured in seconds. Though leaving town, you'll have one of your last looks at the tower until the last phase, and this sign not giving you an excuse to turn back, because heading directly into the sun, temps were already in the mid-80s on this June day. Glad that the bends in the road didn't match the signage. Entering the final half mile of this chapter in Les Bras that had only a handful of buildings, proving it's a strong economy if you're a sign maker, as not only does the road flatten out a couple times on this final bend, but you'll likely miss out on the information on the left that holds the ruins of a Roman domicile right behind it, as the waterway crossing will stunt your momentum, getting you ready for today's biggest transition. But first, hoping this is the fountain I was looking for.
Hopefully this is it, otherwise dysentery.
Of course, you're back to climbing after the refill, and it's nowhere near the worst, as this hairpin turn initiates the forest portion of Ventoux, looking friendly at first passing through this hamlet, although the reality is you're leaving the last eating establishment until Reynard, and this is the isolation to get used to along the way, with the grade ramping up to 10% reaching the first big turn, while being fully encased in the forest, bringing a larger sense of silence, no matter if others are whizzing by, already checking the mileage markers to count down.
So far, this climb is pretty much gone, as my prep said. You know, it's not punchy, but it's kind of like death by 1,000 needles. Just slow, grinding, and maybe you get overconfident, but definitely appreciate taking it easy, because definitely in the double digits right now.
The setting of the lower forest becomes clear before the 7-kilometer mark, with these taller trees and protruding rockscapes carved by the Ice Age, seeing the dangers that Georges Berthier succumbed to driving in 1947. But for the most part, this road avoids digging deep into it, not expecting to spot this recently added sculpture hovering above, with the mileage not ticking off as fast as you'd hope. A phenomena heightened when the roadway bends in broad brushstrokes, and the scenery remains more a constant, where it's important to find your own focus on these longer climbs, because the biggest distraction might be the names painted on the road. I could already see some fatigue with others out there, and you'll have to be aware of even more limited space with construction crews. But a clue to this region you could find tucked away at kilometer 8.5, as a Roland Pavilion promotes the reforestation of the area that started 150 years ago, with logging plaguing the mountains all the way back to the Romans. But if you don't spot it, the grade pitching up will signal you've missed it, as support teams start to appear, though sure my 2 bottles was enough. Think about how camera angles on tour coverage don't make this part feel as shut in on TV, and that covering up the street painting must happen often. So at 10K, I decided to grab some shade, going into the Course de Côte du Mont Ventoux Pavilion, a 2-room showcase commemorating the automotive hill climb, that even with some limited French, you understand what a big deal this once was. I could see getting back how this hill sporadically splits up these riders, not even 1,000 meters over sea level yet, returning to similar views, coming up on the most pronounced hairpin in the forest, whose grade depends on how close you take the turn, though really it doesn't let up too much after, though there is some good news here.
No prizes, but halfway there.
In California, Onion Valley Road is almost identical to Mont Ventoux in both mileage and grade, with the exception being placed nearly 1,000 meters above. But what I learned from that effort is that you'll exert yourself more than you can keep track of, with the elevation adding to your fatigue and dehydration that will come up faster than you'd expect. So when you do come up to patches of riders, you have to fight the urge, getting caught up and pushing yourself in IRL.
Well, normally it takes me about an hour and a half to cover the 13 miles on Zwift. Gotta take us a tempo, just not getting the time.
So far, Zwift had been really helpful, prepping myself for the upcoming grades, giving me one less thing to worry about. Though here in the real world, you look for distractions here, like possible side roads. But visualizing how a Tour de France would play out occupied a good part of my time.
Now, where would you attack? Well, I think it depends on how deep you are in the Tour, how far you are behind. My guess is after this flat part, if you really need to make up time, this is really when you need to kick it into gear, because it gets into double digits for a significant amount of time.
The reason why I divided the forest into upper and lower at the halfway point is clearly noticing the shorter height of the trees up here, meaning less shade and more time for the road to cook during the day, with this radiant heat from the pavement offsetting the altitude, now coming up on an unnoted landmark.
Now in 2019, because of high winds, they had to move the finish line up to Chalet Reynard about 3 miles closer. It was so last minute, they didn't have a chance to accommodate everyone up there, so it was a real mess down here. That's when Chris Froome crashed and started running here. Not me today.
At the top of the forest, there are portions where the grade softens and the home starts to signal the transition of environments, as I could see the next phase a half kilometer ahead. Excited to have this last chapter in reach, and there was no quitting on getting there, with a few instances of deja vu, reaching Chalet Reynard, in place for nearly 100 years, first purpose for mainly winter sports, now more eccentric for paved activities, as I knew this was a must stop, checking in with Hank and others how their experience was going, as there's plenty more souvenirs inside, and some fluids to relax with, using a few moments to take it all in before the final push. You're greeted on this last quarter with a bike lane dedicated on the climbing side, and you'll see more riders up here, merging with those ascending from Salt and parking at Reynard. As one thing discernible from this point on Zwift was the flatter portions didn't come across as such in IRL, as the first big right-hand turn is a special one, finally gaining your eyes again on your main target.
So long since I've had that at my sight, it's kind of like when people saw Wizard of Oz and everything was in color. It's just there.
Whatever double-digit grades you get here are not sustained until the end, and you'll find a number of photographers set up if you're beyond doing it for the gram. Now down to 5 kilometers left, feeling a little bittersweet, making sure to look back to take it all in, feeling the presence of regrowth, though not all the way there, with most cyclists riding at tempo centered around absorbing the experience. As on this second inside curve, there are 2 reasons to stop. The first is if you're into frequenting another pavilion that spotlights the explorers and flora of the mountain, and serving as a shelter for Ventoux' extreme weather changes, and another opportunity for flowing water that was good enough the first time I was happy to imbibe. Back on the road, you're just crossing the 5,000 feet above sea level mark, which can be significant based on a number of factors.
I'm about a mile above sea level, but sometimes altitude can really take it to you. Now, while California doesn't seem to bug me too much, being off the bike for about a week, definitely my lung capacity is not where it should be at, so drinking extra water.
Most of this portion of the climb will feel like it hovers around 7%. And the number of people out here was remarkable considering it was a weekday and summer vacation hadn't started, noticing how vegetation thinned with elevation. But obviously you have to keep your head on the swivel for oncoming traffic because the views get exponentially distracting. So stay alert for the number of automobile clubs that still frequent it too. Now with under 3 kilometers left, the road doesn't zigzag as much. Nice to directionally have some variety, bring in other angles to experience Ventoux. But the straighter sections of the climb seem to go faster, with more pulling over to take pics the closer we got. And now with only 2 kilometers left, I didn't want it to be over, as I was odd more with every pedal stroke, with the settings increasingly becoming unworldly, making me feel like this is the closest thing to visiting another planet, though highly approving seeing kids on this portion, even though the grade was starting to ramp up, as with 1.5 kilometers left, it's time to think about your final lunge.
They haven't attacked yet. They need the seconds. It's pitchy here, so this is the time to make things do. Woof.
Before you buckle up for that last kilometer, hopefully you'll be aware of the monument to your right, honoring the memory of Tom Simpson, who lost his life in 1967 on the tour, with other substances contributing, being a pilgrimage point for cyclists. Appropriate the peak looked ominous from here. The ride resumes with an 8 to 9% grade, but ramps up to double digits on the straightaway, holding that grade through the curve. That might be enough to halt your progress, and if so, the southern view behind us might be for you, as I was exalted to see the top centered for the final time, hoping a chalk outline wouldn't be needed for me. For these final 500 meters, feel like all your cycling experiences culminating to this moment, where despite your pain, try not to ride with your head down, because this is a memory that'll last your lifetime. Instead of stopping off before the final curve, as Brasserie Le Venderon would be a promising spot later, here in place since 1903, although the jam from parking at the peak is the ride's biggest buzzkill, but quickly erased on this conclusive switchback, seemingly unreal. And if your inclination is to shun the road to head up this ramp, you'd be right, which is still very pitchy, but you don't think of the numbers now, because the atmosphere at the top makes it feel like a crowning moment, and a little more so if you could find the final marker tucked away. Easy to swap stories with the scores abound. Even uncoordinated, it feels like a celebration, seeing a good number having their families meet at the summit. And even though a souvenir seems apropos, it was also meaningful to have some of my California pals along for the ride. And if you have other keepsakes, maybe they'll just happen to find their place too. Make sure at the peak also to give yourself moments to take it all in, including the top on the backside, even without your bike. But beware, because looking east into the Alps may birth a sense for more adventure, as I could have spent an infinite amount of time up here. But with a few drips sprinkling in, it was a good cue to make my return, as just like the climb, the 3 noted sections feel even more distinct, with the top feeling sticky and inconsistent from the winds, the middle putting you at speeds that cars can't match, and the lighter slope at the bottom giving you just enough velocity to let the wind have a cooling effect. But most importantly, don't go into super tuck mode at the top, because this is the best chance to take in all these panoramas. Although I could have returned my bike, I had to cross the start line for posterity, and even going around the small traffic circle felt like a victory lap. Time to rejoice back in Bédouin, where there's no shortage of post-ride options in town, especially kowtowing to those making it down the mountain, as everything will taste better after climbing Mont Ventoux.
No need for me to exaggerate how monumental this climb is. I mean, you can feel the history over every grain of pavement you cover. You know, at the same time, it's an exceptional climb, especially the top part. I mean, I'm from another continent. This just feels intergalactic, and just to see how many other people here just have the same sense of joy up there. I mean, it's a culmination almost of everything we do, so we all have goals and reasons to justify what we're doing, and I guess I've done it. Anyways, you want to support us, please hit the subscribe button, go to our shop so we can bring you more from all these states of dirt.